Afghanistan. No. Hold on, wait. Afghanistan. Hell, even I'm confused at this point. A place so strategically located that everybody wants a piece and nobody can hold on to it. Just ask these guys. Or these guys. Or maybe even these guys. Maybe don't ask those guys. Afghanistan is much more than the constant wars and violence you see here in the US media. It is a majestic, misunderstood, and complex nation with extreme historical significance, so let's get into it. Afghanistan is a landlocked Central Asian country that's bordered by nations that are just as controversial as itself. Countries like China, Iran, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan, and basically every other stan. The capital city of Kabul is bound by the Hindu Kush mountain range, west of the Himalayas, and is one of the highest elevations of any capital city on Earth at nearly 5,900 feet above sea level. In fact, Afghanistan has the 7th highest average elevation of any country in the world, and they are by far and away the largest nation on that list. The only nation being ahead of them, with even half of their population, is Nepal. Before modern-day Afghanistan was known as the Graveyard of Empires, it was more like the Empire's backyard. Specifically, the Achaemenid Empire, which was one of history's first megastates. Control was loose, borders looser, and the mountains were still in the way. You should probably get used to that theme. Then along came Alexander the Great, whose strategy for world domination usually consisted of sleeping with the locals and taking things by force. He rolled in around 330 BCE, conquered the place, and married a local noblewoman, Roxana of Bactria. Were his tactics romantic? No, not particularly. Were they effective? Also no, not really. After his death, his successor set up the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, which, even though it sounds like a fusion restaurant, became the easternmost outpost of Greek influence, while at the same time being one of the westernmost outposts of Buddhist philosophy. The Bamiyan Buddhas were carved into cliffs nearly 1,400 years ago, and were some of the largest known Buddhas in the world. And you're probably thinking, why have I never seen one of these before? And the short answer is, well, because of these guys. So yeah, before it became the nightmare of Genghis Khan, the Soviet Union, and the Pentagon, Afghanistan was a melting pot of Eastern and Western culture. It was also the birthplace of Zoroastrianism, but that's a story for a whole nother day. As centuries rolled on, Afghanistan became a hot property on the Silk Road. From the Samanids to the Ghaznavids to the Ghurids, Islamic dynasties turned the region into a melting pot of Persian, Turkic, and South Asian influence. Cities like Herat and Balkh weren't just on the map, they were the map. It was rich, it was cultured, and yes, still incredibly difficult to govern. Sound familiar? Even though culture thrived, don't get it twisted, this was still a masterclass in decentralized power. Local warlords, tribal leaders, and scholars all coexisted in this beautiful sort of chaos. But through all the dynasties, doctrines, and drama, the one thing that held true was that Afghanistan wasn't just a place you passed through, it was a place where ambition stalled. A crossroad of culture, a cradle of ideas, and more often than not, a reality check for empires that thought they could tame it. Resistance wasn't the exception here, it was the default. And that's where we lead into section 2. To preface this section, we need to first talk about the one constant in this region, Islam. Starting in the 7th century, Arab Muslim armies swept through what is now Afghanistan. Unlike the Greeks before them, they didn't just pass through and ghost the region, Islam actually stuck. Over time, Afghanistan became a center for Islamic learning, poetry, architecture, and, well, brutal power struggles. So I guess I meant that there's two constants. Fast forward through many Islamic reigns and shahs, and that brings us to our first victim, the Mongols. Cue and John Green. Genghis Khan didn't just conquer, he absolutely leveled entire cities here. Like, there is literally a city called the City of Screams because of how brutal it was. I mean, are we really surprised? This was just another Tuesday by his standards. When Genghis Khan had ultimately passed, his son ordered the Mongols withdraw from Afghanistan, leaving the nation fragmented in the process. In the 18th century, we saw the establishment of modern-day Afghanistan, and not long after that, our second contestant came on down, Great Britain. And they thought, hey, we took India, Afghanistan should be easy, right? Wrong. Over the next few years, they fought 3 Anglo-Afghan wars, losing each one of them in spectacularly embarrassing fashion. In 1842, 16,000 British troops and camp followers left Kabul. Of those 16,000, how many would you guess made it back? Maybe half of them? Quarter of them, one. One singular soul made it back from Kabul alive, Dr. William Bryden. And just look at his face. Look how exhausted and traumatized this man looks. So ultimately, Britain withdrew entirely, realizing that this was an exercise in futility. Next up, the Soviets. They gave it a shot in 1979. They saw Vietnam and thought, wow, we can do that too. 10 years, thousands of casualties, billions of dollars later, and they limped out without much success. Surely, at this point, we would have learned that history repeats itself and nothing good could possibly come out of invading Afghanistan, right? Well, that's where you'd be wrong again. The United States shows up in 2001, flush with the highest tech gear, the largest military budget in the world, some Hollywood confidence, and a very vague definition of the term mission accomplished. What could possibly go wrong? Operation Enduring Freedom slowly turned into a disaster, ending 20 years later in 2021 with a rushed airport exit and an extremely awkward press conference. Once again, trillions of dollars spent, thousands of lives lost, and it ended the same way it always does here. The foreign power leaves, the locals deal with the aftermath, and the mountains, still unconquered, still watching. Afghanistan isn't just mountains and war stories. It's a tapestry of ethnic groups, languages, and loyalties. The biggest group? The Pashtuns. But they're far from alone. You have groups like the Tajiks, the Hazaras, the Uzbeks, each with their own histories, rivalries, and power bases. Then you have Pashtunwali, which is a code of honor that's older than Islam itself. Think loyalty, revenge, hospitality, in that order. Power here in Afghanistan, never fully centralized. Even when there's a government in Kabul, rural areas typically run themselves through local strongmen or tribal councils. They play by their own rules. And then, of course, there's the Taliban, version 1.0 in the 90s. They were born out of the chaos. Rigid, brutal, ultra-conservative. And then they came back with version 2.0 in the 2020s. They may have had slicker PR, but ultimately they had the same ideology. And to my fellow movie lovers, I ask you, when has the sequel ever been better than the original? So what do we do with all this? Well, if you want to understand why a landlocked country of 40 million people still makes global headlines, you need to understand the layers beneath the headlines. The ethnic divisions, the coded loyalties, the legacies of occupation, and the struggle for control. That never really stops, but that's a story for part 2, because Afghanistan's modern challenges and why they still matter deserve a deep dive of their own. This is my first YouTube video, and obviously, I don't know everything about Afghanistan, nor do I live there, so if you have a cool story about Afghanistan or something interesting to add, go ahead and leave it down in the comments below. I'd love to read them. This was part 1 of my historic deep dive series. I'll be going in alphabetical order, covering every UN-recognized country, and eventually some that aren't so recognized. I'll be alternating these with my current event series, tackling countries in reverse alphabetical order from Zimbabwe all the way down to, you guessed it, Afghanistan. We'll be exploring modern struggles, geopolitics, and everything in between, including socioeconomic breakdowns. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.